Opera. Would you like to talk a little bit about her legacy, and what inspired you?
Yes, well, I was inspired by Marian Anderson practically before seeing her face. One of my mentors in the neighborhood where I lived had some 78s, and she said, you're a musical child, I'm sure you're going to enjoy these. But in my house, we didn't have a machine that would play a 78. They played 33s and long silver LPs. But my next door neighbor had a machine, had the kind of stereo that would play a 78. And so I was invited to come over to her house anytime that I wanted to. She didn't have children. I spent a lot of time there. And I listened to various things. There was Lily Pons singing all kinds of things, and sort of singers of that era. And then I put on a recording of Marian Anderson. And she was singing the Brahms Alto Rhapsody with Munch. I thought, I didn't understand it, but I knew there was something important going on, and that I had never heard a female voice in that timbre. I never heard a female voice that could sing that low, and of course, incredibly beautifully. And so after that, I wanted to know more about her, and it just happened that very soon after that, there was a film called The Lady from Philadelphia. And then I was actually able to see this face and this majesty of a woman, and I was completely captivated. And I read her book, My Lord, What a Morning, which came out shortly after that, so I became a kind of Marian Anderson groupie. And I was very pleased about that, because it was certainly an inspiration. And then later, can you believe, it was incredible. Imagine sort of sitting in the living room and talking to Marian Anderson. But that is what she invited me to do, and that's what I did. And on several occasions, and I feel very lucky to this day to be able to recall just being there and asking her to talk about her life, which she wasn't interested in doing at all. She wanted to know, by this time I was singing professionally myself, and she wanted to know where I had been and what I'd been singing. And that was the last thing I wanted to talk about. I wanted to know what it was like to tour Europe at the time when everything was a monarchy in every country. And she was singing for kings and queens and aristocracy everywhere, and invited to court, and invited to see these people privately, because they were so taken by her voice. I had the experience of going to Oslo to sing when President Carter was given the Peace Prize. And there was a woman in the audience who said that she had been about 11 years old. She was now a woman of a certain age. She was about 11 years old when Marian Anderson sang in that very hall. And she said, and I've been waiting for somebody that looks like you to come and sing in this hall again. I was very moved.
So first singing lesson with 17.
17, yes.
But by the age of 24, you were already on the stage of the Deutsche Oper Berlin.
Which is absurd, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if it's absurd. I'd say it's maybe interesting. It's wonderful. I mean, Rosa Ponselle was on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera at age 21.
Yes.
So these things do happen.
They do happen,
I think
yes.
what is really remarkable about you being on stage with the Deutsche Oper at age 24 is about what you did there.
Yes.
Which is the role of Elizabeth in Wagner's Tannhäuser.
Yes. Which was my first outing as a professional singer. I mean, it wasn't as though I had other opera roles that I've been singing in other places. No, this was it.
So I'm sure you remember, how did this come about?
Well, when I talk about absurd, I mean absurdly wonderful. I was minding my own business, working on my master's degree at the University of Michigan, and received an invitation to come to Washington because a wealthy industrialist by the name of J. Walter Corbett, who was from Cincinnati at the time, thought that he would do something in order to inhibit American singers having to traipse all over Europe auditioning for opera houses, that he could afford it. So what he did was to invite 20 general directors from opera houses around Europe to come to New York on his dime for 2 weeks, and they had to sit there during the day and listen to American singers. And somehow I was invited to do this, and was very happy, you know, that someone was going to pay my way to Washington, and I could stay in a hotel for a couple of days and all of that. And the time that I was meant to sing, of course, it was pouring rain. And So I arrived looking like kind of a wet poodle, you know. My hair was completely wet and I didn't have anything with which to cover it. And so I needed a bit of time to sort of get ready to sing for these people, whoever they were. And I went out at my appointed time, singing with the pianist with whom I'd never worked before ever. And he played my arias that I sang. And after I finished singing, of course, like everybody, I was packing up to go. No one had said to stay. I didn't know what to do. No one had said what the protocol was for the day. And so I was packing up to leave, and sort of in came this very tall, sort of German gentleman, sort of speaking English to me. And he said, good afternoon, my name is Egon Zeyfellner, and I am from the Opera House in Berlin. I want to talk to you. And so I said, yes, what would you like? He said, I've been looking through my Filofax. Does anybody remember Filofax? I've been looking through my Filofax. And I like very much that you sang the second aria, which we all know is more difficult in Tannhäuser than the first one, which if the orchestra is good, that aria, Die Treue Halle, practically sings itself. But I was singing the prayer, which takes a very deep understanding of legato, and you're singing with just the wood, the brass in the orchestra, so you really have to be able to support your voice. And so, boom, I was singing with piano. And he came backstage and he said, that was a very good aria, and I've looked in my book and I have a date in which you can sing in my opera house in December. This was in May, and so I said, he said first, do you know the rest of that opera? I said, well, no, but I could learn it in a couple of weeks. He said, it doesn't need to be quite so fast. And so it's incredible. I left Michigan, and as I had this invitation, and I was still working on my degree, I had this invitation to sing in this German opera house. I thought, it would be very good to speak German. I didn't know how many people in Berlin would speak English. And I was singing, he was inviting me to sing a German role in the largest opera house in Germany. I thought perhaps it'd be better to be able to talk to people. So I went to Duke University and studied for 5 months conversational German. So by the time I got to the opera house in Berlin, at least I could talk to my colleagues, and of course I knew my part. I'd studied it. And I didn't know at the time that you didn't have to learn everybody else's part. I mean, this was my first one, okay? So I did, and I arrived and was having a wonderful time in the rehearsals. I was so naive that I didn't know that I should have insisted on an orchestral rehearsal on the stage. We had an orchestral rehearsal, but on the mock stage. So my first experience on the stage was the night of my debut. The entrance for Elizabeth is a 45-degree incline from the back of the stage down to the front of the stage. And I was very lucky in that the person for whom that production had been new, Elizabeth Grumer, a wonderful singer, came to me in my dressing room long before I was meant to sing on the stage. She said, I want to give you a hint. Look at your feet until you're at the bottom of that incline. No one can tell where your eyes are. Keep your head up, but your eyes down so you can see where you're going. And so that you don't sort of do anything silly with your costume. And no one else had said that to me. I was so very lucky. But it goes on that I sang the first act. Well, I sang the second act. That's when my character comes onto the opera. And directly after singing the second act, Egon Zeyfellner came to my dressing room and said, this is going very well. I'd like to offer you a contract for 3 years to come to the opera house. And I said, but Herr Professor, I haven't finished the opera. And his retort was, but I heard you sing that in New York. That's fine. Talk about absurdity. Wonderful absurdity.
Yes. And then, I mean, it kind of continues in a very unusual fashion because you decided not to stay.
After 3 years, after being invited to sing so many operas that I knew my 20s voice was not ready to do, like Parsifal or Chrysothemis and Electra and those things, it was becoming increasingly difficult as a very young singer to keep saying, oh, I don't think I ought to. And so I, in my naivete, went along to this wonderful man that invited me to come to his opera house. And I said, I think I need to go away for a few years and have a bit more experience simply singing. And then I can come back and do things like Kundry and so on, but not right now. I don't really think that I should. And I thought he would say, oh, what a clever girl. And he said something in German to the effect, who in the world do you think you are? And it wasn't quite that unkind, but it was, you know, you must be touched in the head or something. And I did go, I left the opera house not knowing what I was going to do next. I mean, it isn't as though I had sort of reams and reams of things on my list of sort of touring. I was, of course, always a recitalist and always enjoyed that, but I didn't have any big plans. I just thought that in order to save my voice, that I had to leave the opera house at age 26 because I wasn't going to sing Kundry at age 26.